Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Kathryn Garforth from Garforth Education, and this is the recording of the 30th episode of the Right to Read initiative. I'm very excited to reach that accomplishment in, just over 2 months, which I think is pretty cool. So if you haven't done so, make sure that you follow the Right to Read initiative on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so that you know about these conversations, because I've had a lot of really good guests so far, and I'm looking forward to my guests in the future. If you're watching this and think that you'd enjoy joining me for a conversation, please reach out and I'd love to connect with you. Today, I'm very excited to have Deirdre O'Toole join me again from Ireland. Yesterday, we spoke about the discrepancy between using a phonics program and using phonics instruction and those level texts that are in so many classrooms and schools around the world. Today, she's going to give us a sneak peek inside of the resources and activities that she does in her classroom with her students. Thank you for joining me today again, Dee. Do you want to take a minute and let people know who you are and what you do?
Thank you, Kathryn, and thank you so much for having me on again. Coming on twice, 2 days in a row is like, wow, such an honor. Thank you. And congratulations, 30 episodes. You're doing great work to really spread the word and, really help every child learn how to read. So as Kathryn says, I'm from Ireland. I have been teaching for 17 years and I am currently teaching what's called junior infants. So it's our first formal year of schooling in Ireland. So we've got 2 years of infants, it's junior infants and senior infants. And children are 4 and 5 in junior infants. Most of them would be 5 by March-ish. We also have 2 free years of preschool in Ireland. It's fairly recent that it's been 2 years. It's not full 2 years for everybody, depending on what month you were born, but you can get 1.5 years up to 2 years of free preschool. So that's had an impact on our teaching. And we have actually a framework, a curriculum framework for 0 to 6. It's called ASHTR, which means journey, which I suppose focuses on child development and well-being, and with a big focus on playful learning and learning through play. Up to the age of 6. So that covers us in junior infants and senior infants as well. So I'm a big fan of playful learning, very passionate about it. But we also have to balance that with this massive overloaded curriculum that we have here. So we've got 12 subjects to teach: English, Irish, maths, history, geography, science, art, drama, music, physical education, social, personal, emotional, and one more, religious education. So we've a lot to cram in. We have objectives to fulfill, and we know that when it comes to literacy, a lot of it needs to be very explicit, direct teaching. So it can be a bit of a juggle trying to keep that playful learning going, as well as that explicit instruction in literacy. Kathryn, you've asked me to talk about what I do in my classroom, and
well, can we first, before we go there, there's a couple things that I want to cover before we talk about your classroom teaching. One is that you've created a fabulous Facebook group for teachers. It's the Science of Reading discussion for Irish teachers. Am I correct in that?
That's correct, yeah.
And then for listeners in Canada and the US, Dee's speaking about teaching those pre-K students in junior kindergarten and senior kindergarten, just for a reference point. Now, before we talk about what you're doing in your classroom, can you talk a little bit about your education as a teacher and your shift in your approach to teaching?
Yeah, so like I said, we've a lot to cover, and my degree was just 3 years. So between the 12 subjects and covering the age range from 4 to 12, there was a lot to cover. Playful learning didn't really come into it much. Literacy was okay in parts, but not fantastic. We don't have much obligation here in Ireland for continuous professional development. When we get a new curriculum in a particular subject, we will have in-service training, but that might be once a year, maybe for a day. So there's not much. And I spoke about this last night, but depending on what's happening in your own life, what's happening in your school, you may or may not be interested or have the time to do any, reading or research or professional development. But over the last couple of years, I've just found myself in that space where I was ready to learn more. I've always been interested in learning more, but I think COVID really gave me the opportunity to really do a deep dive into both play and literacy. So about 4 years ago, I did a course on play and I absolutely loved it. So I started really implementing the play, and I will talk a little bit about that now, because it does have a lot of links to literacy, especially for me in my classroom anyway. And then I found myself at a bit of a loss with my literacy teaching. I was trying my best, but knew something wasn't right, couldn't really figure it out. And then with COVID, then a whole world of webinars and podcasts and all sorts of things opened up to me around the science of reading and all of the research that has been done into reading, which I was completely unaware of beforehand. I wasn't really into reading any kind of academic texts at all. I loved going to courses and listening to people and talking with other teachers, but and I was on Instagram, like talking to other teachers there too, but it's all very informal, I suppose. So in Canada, like I said, you've got your junior kindergarten, and I know it's different in the States and Canada and the UK, it's all quite different. So when our junior infants come to us, they like I say, they're 4, maybe 5 already, or soon turning 5. There's no expectations on them, so there's no prescribed curriculum for them in preschool, and they don't have to go to preschool. Now 99% of them do, but there's no they don't have to have any alphabet knowledge or anything like that. So they can come into us with absolutely nothing. But then we have kids who come in and they're sometimes you have some who can read and some who are really interested in writing, and we they come in with various levels of gross and fine motor skills as well. In the preschools, because it's now a 2-year free scheme, I think some of the preschools feel under pressure in the second year to get the kids ready for school, and they feel like they have to do phonics or they have to have them doing worksheets. Now I feel at that age really they should be singing songs, nursery rhymes, listening to stories.
Well, and the important thing to think about is where they're at developmentally, and there's so many pre-literacy skills that you can work on and teach without bringing a pencil or paper or worksheet. into the equation. And they are children, they are preschoolers. They need to learn to be creative and use their imagination and not just try to fit into that square box.
Absolutely. And actually, our chief inspector from the Department of Education actually published a report only recently speaking out against the schoolification of preschool, saying that really, there should be more of an emphasis on child-led activities rather than prescribed activities. So like we get a real mix. So for the first term, now I'm speaking for myself now, there are a lot of teachers who would do very similar to me. But for the first term, what I've done is a focus on pre-writing and pre-reading. So we're not reading, we're not writing, we are getting ready to read and write. So for pre-reading, that means listening skills and some phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. And for pre-writing skills, that's working on gross motor skills, fine motor skills, and pencil control. So all of that before doing any letters or letter formation or any phonics or anything like that. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, and there are, again, we're talking about 4 and just 5-year-olds. And yes, there are some children that are developmentally ready and some that may have already learned how to read. But in those first couple of weeks when you're working with these little ones, it's really a discovery process for everyone, because we want the students who don't have that knowledge from preschool to feel comfortable and not overwhelmed, and to give you as a teacher an understanding of where they are at. So I guess one of the things that I'm curious, are there any screening tools that you do at this stage to look at some of those pre-literacy levels?
No, it's something we're exploring in school at the moment. Did do some phonological awareness screening, but we were just, like say, trying things out. What we would find is that quite a few of them really need to just work on listening skills to begin with. And then also the functional language, like first, next, last, before, after, left to right. Because I find with some of these assessments and screeners is that the child might be able to do what you're asking them, but they don't know what you're asking them. So if you say to a child, well, what's the last sound in cat? And they don't understand, first of all, they mightn't understand what you mean by sound. And second of all, they might have trouble understanding last and where last is in a word. So I think you need to be quite careful with what you use and how you interpret the results. So like if anyone out there has any good ones to share with me, I'd love to see them, because we've tried a couple of different things and I haven't found anything that I love yet. So it's mostly just kind of observation in the beginning, and we do also connect with the preschools before the children start. So if there's anything major that we need to know about, we would usually know about it beforehand. So like I said, listening skills is a big one. So I spent all of September working on listening skills. So I had listening games, listening for environmental sounds and animal sounds, making sounds with our voices, with our bodies, reading books about sounds, going on listening walks, all that kind of thing. And as well, working on that functional language, beginning, middle, end, first, next, last. So lots of games around that, as well as very explicit teaching. And it wasn't something that I would have done in the past, but that came from doing assessments and realizing, okay, these kids are having trouble with this language. So it's something I think is actually quite important. You can't assume anything. You really, they can surprise you sometimes. You think, especially with the pandemic, because these kids have missed out on a lot of stuff. So, never.
Well, that's an important thing to consider, especially over these next few years in our classrooms when we're looking at the junior kindergarten and the kindergarten students. They have had a very atypical early childhood development, where they've been in a world that is so completely different than any of us have experienced. And depending on their situation, it could be very, very isolating and different, especially if they're stuck at home with their parents who are working online and trying to just make things work. I mean, childcare has been a challenge. I mean, I have children in this age range, and I know how difficult. And, my older children, so I have a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an 8-year-old. So my daughter just turned 5 in March. So she would be a student in your classroom this year. And the things that I did with my older two pre-COVID, like all the, the music classes and the activities and the social interactions didn't happen. I mean, the pandemic hit right before her 3rd birthday. And so she didn't get the same preschool exposure. And
she won't remember life before COVID.
Exactly. And her experience is very different. So we need to be conscious of that as teachers, because without going to play school, maybe they wouldn't have the same nursery rhyme exposure. And that those playings with sound, which is so important in helping develop that phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, which is an essential pre-reading skill.
Yeah, I suppose it's just tuning them in, tuning their ears into listening. But yeah, I mean, they've missed out on some language development, by not going to the likes of those play groups and things. They've missed out on motor skill development because they haven't been going to the soft play. There's lots of things that they really have missed out on. We won't actually even see the impact of it yet for the next, it'll be another few years before we really see it. And the other problem is an increase in screen time. And look, I mean, working from home, not easy when you have no childcare. So it's totally understandable how this has happened, but it is a big, big problem. And it affects their concentration levels hugely. So after, working on the listening skills, we then started this program. I have it here. So you had Dr. Jen O'Sullivan on a while ago, and she brought out this program for phonological awareness. It's called A Sound Beginning for Reading, and I found it excellent. It's lots of games and fun activities for developing phonological awareness. And it's easy to do. It's easy to make it fun. You're getting the kids up and moving. So we started with, words in a sentence, the concept of a word, because when you speak, it's a continuous stream of sounds. So kids have no idea what a word is. So we got up and we stomped our feet for the words in a sentence. And for syllables, we like tapping our head, shoulders, knees, and toes. So just lots of fun activities like that. So did that for another month or so, and working on rhyming as well. And rhyming, I suppose, is probably an easy one because we know how to do that. We've got so many lovely rhyming books. What I found in the past, I was doing it quite incidentally, when we were reading a story, but really tried to focus on it the last couple of years in that first term.
But there is a caveat to that. It's very important to work on this and draw students' attention to it. But there are some children that don't pick up or have the awareness of it until they actually do begin to read and see the printed language and recognize it in the words written form. So yes, work on it. It's extremely valuable, but it's not the end of the world if some of your students don't have it down.
Yeah, you don't need to get everybody, up to a certain level with it or anything like that. You don't need to spend a whole lot of time on it, because you want to move forward, because the important piece to get to is phonemic awareness. Okay, so we really want to start working on those phonemes as soon as possible. And the other thing about rhyming as well is that rhyme recognition comes easily to most children. Rhyme production is a different skill altogether, and some kids find that really, really difficult. So they don't need to master that before moving on to the next step. And all of those activities, so words in a sentence and syllables, onset and rhyme, and rhyming. Yes, so I did some work on that before phonemic awareness, but that work doesn't just stop then. You want to continue that on throughout the first couple of years of school, because, well, syllabification is obviously very important when it comes to reading longer words and writing longer words. So it's not something you'd want to just drop. And then obviously nursery rhymes are a huge thing for the younger children. So we would spend a lot of time doing those as well over the first couple of months, and sending them home as well. So just sending home a printout of the nursery rhymes for the parents to do with the children at home, or what we've been doing since COVID as well is sending video links on Seesaw. So Seesaw is the communication platform we're using with parents, so we can share all those videos. So then we get to phonemic awareness, and this, like I said, is really the key part. And for me, it was the missing piece. This is what I didn't know I was missing in my phonics teaching, was the phonemic awareness. So a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in spoken speech. It's a very abstract concept, and some phonemes are kind of difficult to pronounce on their own. So I'll come back to that in a few minutes. But I can get a bit caught up with it myself sometimes. I'm like, looking in the mirror and I'm going, whoa, trying to figure out, am I saying it right, and what my mouth is doing. But the articulatory gestures, with your mouth, and paying attention to that, I found has been really, really helpful for me and for the kids in my class. So I have a sound wall in my class. Now, there's no scientific research to back up using a sound wall in your classroom, but I just found it something that would be useful for me as a reference. And I just reference it to the children when we're learning a new sound or comparing two sounds. But it's not something that you have to have in your classroom. So I suppose a sound wall, for anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's pictures of the mouth forming different sounds. Here. So like this. So it would be, instead of having not necessarily instead of having a word wall, but maybe complementary to a word wall, but more of a focus on phonemes than the letters, if that makes sense. So when we start then looking at phonemic awareness, we look at alliteration. So again, very playful thing to do. You can make up little silly sentences. You can give names to animals, like, okay, here's a hippo. Can anyone think of a name for the hippo? And we call them Harry Hippo or Henry Hippo or whatever. So there's lots of fun to be had with alliteration, and lots of lovely picture books and things that you can use for that as well. Dr. Seuss is a great one, and there's loads. There's also I have this lovely one. It's an Usborne illustrated alphabet, and for each letter it just has a little story. So for E, we have elephant. Even the elephants didn't have enough to eat, as a teeny weeny mouse kept stealing their eggs. So to find all of the words in the story that begin with the eh sound.
Well, and I like that it is working on the sound, yes, and not all of the different phonemes represented by that grapheme, or so by that letter. Right.
Yeah, and you have to be very careful when you buy any alphabet book, especially when it comes to the vowels, because if you're just teaching short vowels first, you want to make sure that that's what's in your book or your set of flashcards or whatever. That said, because we're just looking at phonemic awareness and not letters, you can explore all phonemes. You're not limited to what letters you've covered so far. So some researchers would say that phonemic awareness is best done with letters. And there is research to support that. But for very early on, the beginning readers, so they haven't learned any letters yet, you can work on phonemic awareness without letters because they don't know them yet for a short period of time. And the benefit of it is that you can use all phonemes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes as well. But moving on from alliteration, then start working on initial sounds. So first initial sounds, then final sounds, then medial sounds, which is quite tricky for some children, and then blending and segmenting phonemes. So I use a lot of picture cards. So it's just, could be anything, like something you get off these clip art websites that are royalty free, or you can buy clip art or just cut out from magazines or anything like that. And we can use these to match words and sounds together, like fish and fan. Do they start with the same sound? And the children can give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or you can, spread out all your picture cards and they have to try and match up ones that begin with the same phoneme. There's loads of activities you can do, and not a letter in sight, but you're really just tuning them into the idea of, what a phoneme is, and, being able to isolate them. So I wouldn't necessarily, give them a picture and tell me what's the first sound, because they don't really know what that means. So you do need to spend time on that alliteration, and giving lots of examples and modeling and those kind of activities where they give a yes or no response or matching.
Well, so when we're teaching phonics lessons, we want to make sure that we're very crisp in our pronunciation and not exaggerating the sound, right? So some, if you're teaching this sound or the grapheme F representing the f sound, you want to go fa, right? But when you're working on this early identification of alliteration, exaggerating the sound isn't the same thing that we're talking about having those crisp pronunciations. If I'm say the fan and the fish,
yes,
to exaggerate it and try and accentuate it and draw the child's attention to it.
Yes, and I suppose we probably do it a lot without even noticing we're doing it, and we do the same with, the final sounds, like book. What was the last time? Book.
Yeah.
But like you say, you're just still being careful to make sure that you're articulating it correctly and not adding on any extra sound. I actually have I made this phoneme pronunciation and articulation guide, and this is free on my website, playfulclassroom.ie, and Teachers Pay Teachers. So became very aware that teachers don't know the correct way to pronounce these phonemes, because I didn't really, like I say, I was guided by Jolly Phonics, and that was quite British pronunciations. So this may not help anyone outside of Ireland. Some of it would be fine, but some of it wouldn't. But there's a page for each phoneme, an explanation of how to pronounce it, the picture, and then some examples of where you might find the sound, the beginning, the middle, the end of a word. And so another kind of mind-blowing thing that I learned in the last couple of years, that some sounds aren't at the end of words ever. Like today we were doing the letter X, and I explained to them that X sound is never at the beginning of a word. And one of them was like, well, what about X-ray? And then we talked about that and said, well, actually the first sound in X-ray is X-ray. So that might be helpful for some teachers.
Well, two things. If you can hold up that one of those pages again.
Oh yeah.
So you mentioned having a sound wall and pictures. So a sound wall would have that image of the child's mouth showing the shape the mouth makes when it makes a sound, so that we can draw our students' attention to the shape of the mouth. Because in these pre-K years, there is still the potential for some articulation issues. And as a teacher in the early childhood education field, you may want to help them with this, and even contact a speech and language pathologist if there is one working at your school, to help them with the articulation of these sounds.
Oh, I really feel like we don't have any links with speech and language therapy in schools here, unless we have a particular child that's going for speech therapy, and then sometimes we liaise, but there's no official connection. And I really think there should be, because there's so much overlap with what they do and what we do for beginning readers, and there's so much knowledge that they can share with teachers. I think it's an awful pity, yeah, it's like I said, it's really important to get those pronunciations right, because it makes blending so much easier, and the children pick it up so well. Sometimes we have well-meaning parents and well-meaning preschool teachers who are trying to teach them letters and phonics, but then the kids are learning to pronounce letters the wrong way, like they're saying "b" instead of "b," and it can make things quite difficult. But really, I find by focusing on the phonemes first before we talk about letters, it really helps with that articulation. And
another thing that parents often or may do with this age range is, using the babble or the kid talk, or saying, some children, say lello instead of yellow.
Yes.
Or what's on spaghetti is
Pescetti.
Pescetti, and they think it's cute and they repeat it. I know my sister said hamburger instead of hamburger, and while it's cute and the kids like it when you repeat the words that they use, it's actually not very helpful. And as a teacher at this age level, it's important to identify that and help the child with the proper articulation of the word, because that goes to them when we're actually going to the decoding and the encoding of words in the future.
Yes. And it's cute at 2 or 3, but when they get to 4 or 5, correct pronunciation words is important. Now that said, a lot of kids struggle with the or the and a lot of speech therapists won't work with any kids before they turn 7 on that. So it's, if they're struggling with the that's fine, it's developmentally appropriate. So that's not really one to worry about. And the other one is like S blends, so putting S with another consonant. That's one of the later speech patterns to develop. So another reason for us not to push on with, phonics and reading too early, because, well, if they can't make the sounds, then why are we asking them to read and write them?
Yeah.
But
and just because it's coming up in the chat, since this is a live recording, we're not necessarily going to have the time to put the links to the materials that we're speaking about this as we're going along. But if you look to the replay, that'll be available tomorrow, and the podcast description, we will have links to these resources so you can get access to them.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, for anyone who's looking at that phoneme articulation guide, it's on Teachers Pay Teachers. If you search Playful Classroom, you should find it, and it's free. So yeah, the phonemic awareness, initial sounds, final sounds, medial sounds, then blending and segmenting. So the blending and segmenting is something that I continue on with after they start using the letters, and obviously that's, it's important. I find they're very good at initial sounds, very good at final sounds, and I know in years gone by, you might be doing a new sound and you say, okay, right, our sound today is k. Okay, can anyone think of a word that begins with k? And you always have a couple of children, tractor or spaceship, they're just gone over their head. But I found that by actually focusing on the phonemes first, I don't have that problem now. I haven't had to do any work on initial sounds since I've introduced letters. They've picked up that side of it, no problem. And we didn't do a huge amount of work on it beforehand, but it just, I don't know, it just worked. So for the, sorry, I'm rooting in my box here looking for the picture cards that I brought home. So I use picture cards again for blending and segmenting. So, and I also use my hand. So I will say, I'm going to say the word slowly, and then you're going to tell me what the word is. So I'll say egg, and the children will say egg, and then I'll show them a picture of the egg, and then they will do it along with me, egg, egg. So we're doing both blending and segmenting. These are from Jen O'Sullivan's program again. And if I've introduced a new sound, say we're doing the S sound, I'll pick out some picture cards that have that sound at the beginning or at the end. But again, you're not limited only to the letters that you've covered so far. So even if I haven't done the O or the P sound, I can still get them to blend S, O, P, soap, and they're blending with that new sound that we're working on. So I just find these great. So, blending 2, 3, and 4 phonemes. I don't really go beyond 4 phonemes yet. Some kids are able to blend 4 phonemes, but some would really struggle with that at this stage. So if those cards, I also use, I have some that I got from Amazon. They're called Junior Learning Decoding Flashcards. These multi-purpose because so they have the picture, they've got the dots for the phonemes underneath with a different color for the vowel sounds, and then on the other side is the word. So I'm just using the picture side when I'm doing that oral blending and segmenting, but you could also use these for games where the kids are reading the words or writing the words or whatever. So so those are Junior Learning Decoding Flashcards.
Something that I just want to bring up, I know we had talked about making sure that we mentioned this, but it's very important when you purchase packaged programs to go through them, especially if you're in a smaller country that doesn't necessarily have the publishing houses that are creating the same resources to make sure, especially when it comes to phonemic and phonological awareness, that what the card is asking you to do is correct given your local dialect and how you pronounce things. I know that we see this even across different states in the United States, where there's, the Southern drawl for pronunciation. And, there's always a Canadian joke about or a boot,
Yes,
a rough or a roof.
Yes. Yes, we have that here too.
Right. So it's making sure that what you're asking the students to do and recognize is authentic for the language or the dialect of the language that they do speak, and being conscious of those students that have English as an additional language who may not necessarily have the phonemic awareness for those sounds in their first language or home language.
Actually, by the time a child is a year old, they're already aware of all the phonemes in their native language. Even though they're not speaking it, they're aware of all the phonemes and they can discriminate them. So if your children are coming in and they don't speak English at home, there could be phonemes in English that are not present at all in their language. So in Spanish, they have 5 vowel sounds. In English, we've got nearly 20. So that's a lot of phonemes that they're not familiar with. So it is something it's important to be conscious of. And I spoke last night about the voiced and the unvoiced TH and how that totally baffled me for so long. And one of the reasons for that is because in the Irish language, there is no sound. So in the way that Irish people speak English, we mightn't necessarily pronounce that correctly. So there might be a tendency to throw in a d instead of a th. So so that's one of the reasons that 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 baffles us a little bit here. But it just goes to show that dialects can vary so much, and it is something to be aware of. And I suppose for teachers as well, to make sure that they're enunciating words as correctly as possible. I know my accent is very strong Irish accent. I don't hear it myself, but I'm told. But I try to be careful when we're really looking at words in the classroom.
Well, another example that I can think about between the European pronunciation or the British English would be idea and idea. And then there's nursery rhymes. I know when I'm reading children's books with nursery rhymes with my children, and if it was an English being British book from England, some of the words don't rhyme when I say them. And I think I've come across that a couple of times in some of Julia Donaldson books, which I love, because they have that rhyming cadence to them. But I'm like, oh, that doesn't work when I say it.
Yeah. I suppose, it does just depend. And, you always have to just, I suppose, look at these things before you use them in the classroom, and don't assume that it will always fit. So that's really the phonemic awareness. And then we started phonics then the last couple of years. We started in January. So that's our first introduction to the letters. Now, there are kids who do come in with some letter knowledge and knowledge of the letter names, and we sing the alphabet, of course, and that's very important. And important to sing it slowly, not have this did
you have the new way of singing the alphabet go around in Ireland? I know we had it in Canada.
No, I have seen it on YouTube, but I don't know anybody who has taken it on.
I don't think it's taking up steam, but as an individual with dyslexia who has a problem with phonemic awareness, I can say that I did that onomatopoeia was one sound or one letter. I didn't realize as a younger student that we were actually talking about several.
Yes, yeah. And what I do is I have my big pointy finger and I point to each letter as we sing it nice and slowly, so that they can see that one-to-one correspondence. So when you've done a bit of work on phonemic awareness, I find that you can introduce the sounds at a faster pace. They take to it very well, I find. And most kids will retain them all. You know, you could have the alphabet covered in about 12 weeks. Now, the problem that I have found is the letter formation. That's the tricky part for me. I find, even though we've worked a lot on the gross and the fine motor skills, we actually even followed a program called the Sensory Motor Handwriting Program from Sinead Lamb. I can link that for you as well. But I just find the letter formation is quite difficult for some of the kids, and that's probably holding us back a little bit. But in terms of letter recognition and then blending, that has all gone very well for us. So we talked about this last night as well, as, you know, your SAT, IPN, and, you know, as soon as you've done 5 or 6 letters, if they're the right combination of letters, you can start blending lots of words straight away. So the momentum builds really quickly, and it's actually amazing to watch that within a couple of weeks of learning their first letters, kids are blending words, and I'm like, you can read. They're just like, yay! And it's just fabulous to watch. So there's not much out there in terms of reading material for that stage when they haven't learned all of the letters of the alphabet, but are able to blend and read short words. So I actually started making my own things. So I started making little decodable readers. So, and this is based on the sequence, that the Satpin sequence from Jolly Phonics. So there's just an A4 page, folded in 4, and just using you know, a small amount of letters, just to have little short sentences. It is an ant. It is a tin. An ant in a tin. So just trying to avoid the kind of predictability of it, and making sure that the kids are, you know, really decoding the words that are there and not guessing. So there are a few things on the market for this stage, but not much. I have a few here. Jolly Phonics have some of their own readers. I like these ones. These are called Jolly Phonics Little Word Books. These are new. They only brought them out about a year or two ago. And what I like about them is you cannot guess. So there's lovely illustrations, and then you've got some CVC or CC words that match up to the illustrations, but you can't tell which one is which. So they really have to look at the words. They really have to attend to the words, which you won't get with a leveled reader for kids at this stage. And then Jolly Phonics also have some other ones, again, following the same sequence. These ones are a bit more difficult. They have a little story and a little sentence, but they can be a little bit contrived. It is hard to get a good story that's completely decodable at a very early stage. So they're not bad. And then other ones that I like are the Usborne Very First Reading. And these are like a little shared reading book. So the adult reads one page and then the child has a little sentence to read on the next page. So again, following, that sequence of starting with just the consonants and the short vowels. So, the kids can get a bit of success. So that's where we're at with reading at the moment, is kind of reading those little books. We're reading CVC words. They need a lot of practice at that, and then also writing at that level as well. Now, the writing is a bit harder. It is reciprocal, reading and writing, but you have to kind of join it up for the kids. It's not natural, like reading's not natural, so writing's not natural either. So you really have to show them that they can segment the sounds in a word and then represent that on a page. Now, there's a lot involved in that. So if you want to write the word cup, okay, so first we've got to segment the sounds, up. Then I have to remember, okay, what was the first sound again? Okay, how do I write that? I write that with the letter C. Okay, how do I write a letter C? Okay, I have to start here and then I have to form it this way. Now I have to do the same with up and p. And that's a lot to process. That's a lot for the brain to do and the body to do.
Well, it's very taxing on their working memory, which is that memory that they're using when they're trying to hold information and use it at the same time. It's your little mental scratch pad. And at this age level, it can only store so many items. So if they haven't reached automaticity in their letter formation, and they have to stop and think about it, it's a very labor-intensive, onerous task. So even if they're just writing the word it, a 2-letter word with lines and dots, it can take a significant amount of time and be very tiring and effortful. The other thing to consider is the muscle motor development at that stage. They're just reaching that level. And as we mentioned with the COVID, a lot of these kids aren't necessarily going to have had the same experiences with those fine motor skills and muscle movements, just because of the different play opportunities and materials in their home during the COVID lockdowns.
Yeah, so we do a lot of work on the fine motor skills, but their hand strength just isn't ready to write lots of sentences or longer words. Like, say, even writing a word with 2 phonemes is a lot. And I suppose as well, it's important to point out that, if you see a child trying to write, for example, the word book, and they write the B and the K, that's a developmental stage, and that's fine. That's as much as they're able to, take out of the word to get onto the page. So some kids will just write the first sound that they can hear in a word, and then they'll move on to the next word. Some kids will write the first and the last. And some kids have to go through that stage really before they get to a stage where they can write all of the sounds that they can hear in the word, even if it's just 3 sounds. So it's important to praise children for their efforts in that regard. Oh, you heard that sound, and that's the B sound, you heard it at the beginning of the word. That's great. And you heard the K sound at the end of the word. That's okay. If that's where they're at, that's where they're at. And then you can help them move towards the next stage of getting the medial sound. So we're working a lot on, at that word level at the moment. So I've loads of stuff with me here. So while the letter formation can be quite taxing, the magnetic letters are your friend. Magnetic letters are just so useful in the classroom. And one thing I would advise you is get lots of them and then buy some more and then buy some more, because you can never have enough. They go missing. And if you want to write dad, well, then you need double the amount of D's. So
D's and R's and A's, the vowels.
Yes. So I bought this set for myself. So this is my teacher set. So this is divided up into 26 sections, so I can find the letters that I need. This is for like all the kind of demonstration work that I'm doing on the whiteboard and with the kids sitting around on the carpet. So this is like, you're not allowed to play with this one. The letters have to be in the right place, and I can't have any of them going missing. I like this set because it has the vowel letters in red, and the rest of them are blue. It's not essential, but I just like it. Just do be careful, I suppose, of the font of the ones that you're buying. It is okay to expose kids to different fonts, but at the very, very beginning, I suppose you don't want to confuse them too much. So when we're working on kind of at word level, it could be a whole class or it could be small group. I use these colored magnets. So I got these in Lidl. I don't know if you have Lidl over there. It's like one of our supermarkets that sell all sorts of things like rubber dinghies and vacuum cleaners, as well as ice cream and bread. So you can use bottle tops, you can use cubes, you can use anything.
All our stores have lots of those.
Yeah, so it's just some sort of visual representation of the phonemes. So these are to represent the phonemes, not the letters, but the phonemes. So if we want to work on, say, the word fish, we'll sound it out, and I'll put up the 3 magnets. Sh, and I'll put those up on our whiteboard. Might get kids up to touch them as they say the sounds. Sh. And then underneath that, we'll use our magnetic letters, or you can write with a whiteboard marker or whatever. So the first sound is f. How do we spell that? We spell that with the letter F, and we write the F. What's the next sound? I. How do we spell it? We spell it with the letter I, so we'll write the letter I underneath. And then we have the sh sound. How do we spell that? We spell that one with 2 letters, so we're going to write the letters S, H, and you write it underneath, or use your magnetic letters. So that's I suppose little routine that we do for whether it's whole class or group work, or even working one-on-one. So you can use any kind of manipulatives. You can use your Alconin boxes, your magnetic letters, your whiteboard markers, or your pencil and paper. And then, sorry?
Skywriting, just getting them to use their whole arm to draw the letters in the air.
Oh yeah, the skywriting's great because like sometimes you just need to get them up and standing up and moving, or even sometimes making the shape of the letter with their body, like making the whole body into the letter N or anything like that. Just anything to get them moving. So that little routine for word building is also the routine I use for high frequency words. So in our school, we're now implementing this HeartWords method. So from heartwordmagic.com, which is from Really Great Reading, they have lovely videos. Now we've quite American pronunciations, so not all of them are suitable for us. So again, you just have to check it out beforehand. The idea of a heart word is that when we have a high frequency word that might be spelled irregularly, that we look at the parts that are regular, the parts that we know that, okay, we have lots of letter sound knowledge. So which parts do we know already? And then we're looking at the parts that might be irregularly spelled or has a spelling pattern that we haven't learned yet. And this is the part that we want to learn off by heart. We don't need to learn the whole word off by heart. We only have to learn a certain part of it. And for years and years, I was that teacher who held up the flashcards and I said, okay, this is the word this. Say this. This is the word this. Got to remember it. That's it. And I sent home the lists and flashcards and everything. So I've made these little cards. Again, you can do this on your whiteboards or whatever. So for the word is, we've got two sounds, is. And I would do this without showing them the word first, because I find sometimes if you show them the word first, they get kind of caught up with what letters are there and they won't tune into the sounds, especially your really bright kids, because they're like, oh, well, I know that word. And they're just thinking, oh, yes, they're not thinking about the sounds. So say, right, well, the first sound is I. How do we spell it? We spell it with the letter I. That's fine. Easy. And then the second sound is Z. Okay, how do we spell that? Well, we usually spell it with a Z. But in this word, and in fact, in lots of words, but that's a story for another day, we spell it with the letter S. And then we look at the letters and say the sounds I, Z, is. And we spell it as well with the letter names I, S. We need to just remember this part, that the S is spelling the Z sound. And I've found that as well, doing it this way, when we then look at words like has and was, they're like, oh, teacher, that has the same spelling for the Z sound. So they make the connections themselves. But a couple of repetitions of this is much more likely to cement that irregular or high frequency word in the child's orthographic lexicon in their brain, rather than just look at this word and say it is. This is the word is. That takes a lot of repetitions. Whereas, doing this way, it will give you opportunities to decode other words. I've just noticed the time. We've gone over time already. I could talk all night.
Of course.
So
you've got some great resources, and we'll definitely put those in the show notes and description for you. Before you go, I want to ask you, do you send anything home with your students for the parents to do with them? And what do you do with that?
So I'm not a big fan of homework, but we have a homework policy in our schools. So we have to send homework. And we don't start straight away because we like to ease them in. So we give them the first couple of months off. First term, Nursery Rhymes, we did send home some phonological awareness games as well for them to, do some alliteration games or rhyming games, that kind of thing. And then when we start the phonics, then some little phonics activities and a bit of handwriting and letter formation. So we have some handwriting workbooks. So we can send those home. And then I'm also sending these decodable readers home. So this varies depending on the child. So I don't send the same thing home with every child, because quite quickly, once you start the phonics, you'll start to see the varying abilities. So I just send home the readers, but I make sure it's something that they're able for, that I'm not putting any strain on the parents. And I have sent home some of these sheets from my phoneme articulation guide. I don't know, it might be a bit too technical for parents. I'm not sure how helpful it is for parents, really.
Probably depends on the parent, because some parents are very involved and understanding, and especially if there's a history of struggling with reading in their family.
Yeah, I suppose
they're aware of this sort of thing and wanting to be that active, involved parents. But then there are also the parents that are really at their wits' end, and the idea of doing homework is just too overwhelming, especially with a 4 and 5-year-old.
And that's why I'm not a fan. I think family life, family time is precious, and we don't want to be sending any stress home. And the homework is stressful. It is. There's no two ways about it. Even my kids are now 10 and 13, and homework is still stressful. It's a battle, The other thing I do send home is little just sound cards. So it's just letter cards, and then just for practicing them. And also I would give little word lists, so like decodable word lists, based on what we've done so far. Usually I would work, a couple of weeks behind, so nothing that's brand new to the kids. And they have to like make the words that are on the list. So if the word is map, they have to find the three cards to make the word map. So again, I'm not asking them to write words or anything, because that's difficult for a lot of them still. So it was just something that they're able to do, and to show the parents what they are able to do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Dee. I really feel privileged to talk to you, and I hope that we connect in the future. For listeners, thank you for joining us today or catching up on a replay or the podcast. Have a great evening.